For everybody out there saying that every Rolex looks the same, I think I have the watch for you right here. It's the Lefty GMT. And before you say, oh, that's just moving the crown to the left side of the case, it's not quite that simple. This is a bigger change than you might think. And today, on A Week on the Wrist, we're gonna get into it. This was probably the craziest watch to come out of Watches and Wonders this past spring. I was there in the room when all the watches were sort of presented to the press. And it was kind of a wacky year in general. We had a weird Air King with crown guards. We had a platinum day date with a fluted bezel. And then we had this guy. It's the GMT Master that we all know. I happen to have one on the Oyster bracelet. It also comes in a Jubilee. And there's not much that needs to be said about the watch that you don't already know about Rolex GMT Master 2s, except for the fact that the date and the crown are on the opposite side of the case and the dial. And what does that mean? Is this a watch for lefties? I don't know. Is it a watch for righties that can wear it on their left wrist with the crown down? I don't know. Am I supposed to wear it on my left wrist? I don't know. But I'm wearing it on my left wrist now just to see how it feels. I'll wear it on my right wrist sometimes just to see how it feels. And we'll just have some fun with it. So I have the blue-black variation of this watch, the quote-unquote Batman. I'm not a huge nickname guy, but we'll roll with it. So everything about this watch is basically as expected. I feel like I'm holding the exact same watch that I already own and already know. So there's nothing new there, except the watch fundamentally looks different in the hand and on the wrist because of that left-sided crown. I'm a righty, so engaging with the watch with my left hand it just requires a lot of mental energy. I find myself just flipping it upside down and winding it that way, which is bizarre, but if it works, it works. And then the main other difference is just looking at that ceramic bicolor bezel in black and green. Now, what I've always liked about the Batman is it's logical. The blue is for day, the black is for night. On this one, I suppose the black is still for night, and the green is green. As a righty, I've always been jealous of my left-handed friends who get to wear their watches on their, non-dominant hand being the right wrist, and having that crown pointed down. There's just something interesting about not seeing the crown at the top of the wrist. But wearability-wise, having this on my wrist in this way is sort of my way of experiencing what my left-handed friends feel. And I have to say, I'm into it. But there's an actual use case problem with the way that this watch has been redesigned that makes wearing it on my left wrist a bit problematic. If you're into wearing sleeves like I am, occasionally the watch is going to fall beneath the sleeve. And the fact that the date window and the Cyclops have been shifted to the left of the dial means that oftentimes the date is obscured by your sleeve. So we've been calling this watch the Lefty GMT, but what's kind of very Rolex about this release is they're not calling it a Lefty GMT, and I don't think they want it to be called the Lefty GMT. And it is kind of a big deal for one fundamental reason. Rolex, in the modern state of watches, is probably one of the most hyped up brands that we have, but now it's starting to slow down. This year in steel, two very esoteric watches come out. The Air King is already sort of an off the beaten path watch for Rolex. Adding crown guards to it and putting it in a new case style, it's not gonna break the Rolex market. It's not gonna flood boutiques and fill up wait lists. And I think the same goes for this watch. If you love the GMT, you're usually in the Pepsi bucket. I mean, that's just where people seem to fall. But I do know that there is a small group of people out there that do wish that Rolex would make watches for everyone. So I think this is a big deal, but for a niche audience. And that's where I think Rolex is headed, in the coming years, is trying to manage the demand. And who knows how long this will stay in the collection. Rolex doesn't do limited editions, but they will release watches for short periods of time, as we've seen. You can very well see Talking Watches 2045, ex-collector saying, oh, and I have the lefty green-black GMT. That's what this kind of reminds me of. We're living in it now. And with the internet, it's like we know everything. But who knows? This really strikes me as a niche collector's watch of the future. There's been no predecessor or precursor at scale to this watch that we see here, especially in this color. When I first knew I was going to get this in for review, my thoughts were that I was going to look at it and say, it's just another GMT. I know these watches. You've seen one, you've seen them all. It's going to have a crown on the other side, and that's it. But wearing it and switching wrists and looking at it on my right wrist especially, there's just something just off enough about it to be just inherently stimulating. Like, I play around with this watch more than I've played with any watch that I own, and I've only really had it in my possession for 5 or 6 days. It's almost like this watch has its own complication. Of course, it is a complicated watch with a GMT function, but it's also complicated. I have to think about this watch a lot when I'm wearing it. Whether it's what wrist do I wear it on? How do I wind it? What's the date if I'm wearing it on my left wrist? I'm just having fun with it. And I find that I'm not having that experience as often anymore as I'd like to. And it's really a pleasant surprise when it gets to happen. The 3285 caliber in this watch is the same superlative chronometer officially certified COSC caliber that we know, and we know that it's that caliber because it carries the second crown between the Swiss and Made in the current Rolex production. That is the way that they're signifying their newer updated movements. And while this is the same movement in the other GMT Masters, it has been rotated 180 degrees to effectuate all of the changes in the design that have gone into the watch, from the date window being shifted to the left side of the dial and the crown being shifted to the left side of the case. The case is entirely stainless steel, 40 millimeters with a Cerachrom bicolor bezel in black and green, with crown guards for the fairly large crown that you can operate easily. This has EasyLink extension system, which allows for you to snap and unsnap the bracelet for quick adjustments on the fly. It sounds like this, and then like this, and it's great. There is no, for the ASMR fans out there, nice clicky sound for the bezel. It's quite silent. I don't know if you can hear this, but it's like a thumping. My wife is from Poland. We're always in Europe. And something that I like to do with the bezel when I'm just home in New York is just set it, 6 hours to the left, just so I can keep track of time back home where my in-laws are. And I found myself doing that a lot with this watch too. There's been a nickname going around, people calling this watch the Sprite. I don't like that nickname. So aside from just not liking nicknames, it doesn't really make much sense to me. Sprite has yellow, in its branding, because of the lemon. So we're not gonna call this a Sprite anymore. So maybe we'll stick with superheroes. Green Lantern, anybody? I don't know. If you have a better one, definitely let us know in the comments below. It'd be pretty nice to try to definitively nickname this one once and for all. I have no conclusions whatsoever what wrist you're supposed to wear this on. I've posted this watch on my Instagram. I've asked people to let me know if they think I'm wearing it on the wrong wrist. A lot of you say that I am. A lot of you just tell me that I look great. Thank you. And I think that, if this is the watch that makes the left-handed watch lovers feel good, I think this is a successful release. That's kind of the best conclusion I can come up with. But for others, for collectors, for those just interested in watches, for Rolex lovers, this is about as fun as I've had with a Rolex in a really, really long time. And it doesn't get much better than that.